In a world fractured by the clamor of conflict, where the air hums with the sharp edges of anger and division, there is a moment fleeting yet eternal where a single choice can shift the tide of a heart. Picture a small village, its cobblestone streets worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, nestled in a valley where the scars of war linger like unhealed wounds. Smoke still curls from the ruins of a church, its steeple now a jagged silhouette against the dawn. Here, a woman named Elena stands at the edge of a crater clutching a photograph of her brother lost to a bomb that tore through their home. Her hands tremble not from the cold, but from the weight of a question. How does one forgive when the pain is so raw it feels like betrayal to even consider it? Elena's village is no stranger to suffering. For years, rival factions have clashed over land ideology and pride, leaving families shattered and trust in tatters. The war has ended, at least on paper, but its echoes remain in the wary glances of neighbors, the boarded-up shops, and the silence where laughter once rang. Elena's brother Marco was a peacemaker, a teacher who believed words could mend what swords had broken. He died trying to shield children from the blast, his body a final act of love in a world that seemed to have forgotten the word. Now, Elena faces a choice to nurture the seed of hatred that has taken root in her heart, or to seek a path that feels impossible forgiveness. This is not a story of grand gestures or miraculous resolutions. It is a story of ordinary people grappling with extraordinary pain, seeking light in the shadow of loss. It is a story that resonates with the teachings of Christ and the wisdom of Pope Francis, who both call us to a radical love that defies the logic of a wounded world. In the Gospel of Matthew, Christ speaks words that pierce through the centuries. You have heard that it was said, "Love your neighbor and hate your enemy." But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5:43-44. These are not mere words. They are a challenge, a summons to transform the human heart from a battlefield into a sanctuary. Pope Francis echoes this call in his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, where he writes, "Forgiveness does not mean forgetting or condoning evil, but choosing to break the cycle of vengeance to offer a hand where others would raise a fist." In a world addicted to retribution, where social media amplifies outrage and nations stockpile grievances alongside weapons, this teaching feels both revolutionary and daunting. Yet it is precisely in places like Elena's village, where the wounds are fresh and the stakes are personal, that these words take on flesh. Elena's journey begins not with a grand epiphany, but with a small, reluctant step. She attends a community meeting organized by a local priest, Father Luca, who has seen too many funerals, but refuses to surrender hope. The meeting is tense, the room filled with faces marked by grief and suspicion. Among them is a man named Dario, a former soldier from the opposing faction whose hands once wielded the weapons that tore the village apart. Dario's presence is a spark in a powder keg. Whispers ripple through the crowd, and Elena feels her chest tighten. Why is he here? What right does he have to sit among the grieving? Father Luca, his voice steady yet warm, begins with a story from Scripture, the parable of the Good Samaritan. A man lies bleeding on the road, ignored by those who should help, until a stranger, an enemy, by all cultural measures, kneels to bind his wounds. Who is our neighbor? Father Luca asks, his eyes sweeping the room. And who is our enemy? Christ tells us they are one and the same in the eyes of God. He speaks of Pope Francis's visit to Iraq in 2021, where amid the rubble of Mosul, the Pope knelt with Christians and Muslims alike, praying for peace in a land ravaged by war. Forgiveness, Father Luca says, is not weakness. It is the courage to see the humanity in someone who has caused you pain. Elena listens, her heart a tug-of-war between resentment and curiosity. She thinks of her brother, his laughter, his belief that no one is beyond redemption. She thinks of Christ's words on the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Luke 23:34. Could she, like Christ, pray for those who had taken so much? The idea feels like a betrayal of Marco's memory. Yet something in Father Luca's words stirs her a seed planted in soil she thought barren. The meeting ends with an invitation to return the next week to share stories to listen. Elena hesitates but decides to come back, driven by a mix of guilt and a faint hope she cannot name. Over the weeks she hears stories that mirror her own mother's who lost sons, fathers who lost homes, children who lost innocence. And she hears Dario's story. He speaks haltingly, his voice thick with shame of orders, followed of lives taken, of a heart that now aches under the weight of regret. "I cannot undo what I've done," he says, "but I want to rebuild, if you'll let me." Elena's first instinct is to reject his words, to see them as too little too late. But something shifts when she sees him help rebuild the church, his hands now lifting stones instead of weapons. She sees him sit with the children, teaching them to read his patience, a quiet echo of Marco's. Pope Francis, in his 2015 homily on forgiveness, said, "To forgive is to see the other not as an enemy, but as a brother or sister wounded as we are." Elena begins to wonder if Dario too is wounded, if his remorse is a bridge rather than a wall. This is where the teachings of Christ and Pope Francis intersect with the messiness of human life. Forgiveness is not a single act, but a journey often slow and painful, requiring us to confront our own anger and fear. In today's world, where stress and disconnection fray our relationships, forgiveness can feel like an impossible luxury. We are bombarded by news of conflict nations at odds, families divided, co-workers at war over petty slights. Social media fuels grudges, urging us to unfollow, block, or cancel rather than reconcile. Yet Christ's command to love our enemies and Pope Francis's call to break the cycle of vengeance offer a countercultural path, one that begins with small, intentional steps. For Elena, the first step is prayer. Not the polished prayers of liturgy, but raw, honest words whispered in the dark. She prays for strength, for clarity, for the ability to see Dario not as a monster, but as a man. She prays for Marco, asking his spirit to guide her. Prayer, as Pope Francis notes in Amoris Laetitia, is a way of entering into the heart of God, a space where our wounds meet His mercy. Elena finds that prayer softens her, not erasing her pain, but giving her the courage to face it. The second step is listening. Elena begins to sit with Dario at the meetings, not to absolve him, but to understand. She learns of his own losses, a sister caught in crossfire, a home reduced to ash. His story does not erase her grief, but it complicates her anger, reminding her that suffering is not a zero-sum game. Christ's parable of the prodigal son comes to mind, where the father's love embraces both the wayward son and the resentful brother. Listening, Elena realizes, is an act of love, a way to honor Marco's belief in the power of understanding. The third step is action. Elena joins the church rebuilding effort, working alongside Dario and others. Her hands blister as she hauls stones, but the labor feels holy, a tangible way to rebuild not just a building, but a community. Pope Francis, in his 2020 World Day of Peace message, said, "Peace is built through active participation, through works of justice and mercy." Elena's work becomes a prayer, each stone a step toward healing. She notices the children watching, their eyes wide with hope, and she thinks of Christ's words, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." Matthew 5:9. As months pass, Elena's heart begins to shift. Forgiveness does not come all at once. It is not a lightning bolt, but a slow dawn. She does not forget Marco's death or the pain of that day, but she begins to see Dario as more than his past. She sees him as a neighbor, flawed and seeking just as she is. Their conversations grow easier, their shared work a bridge over the chasm of war. One day, as they lay the final stone in the church's new wall, Dario turns to her, his eyes brimming. "Thank you," he says, "for giving me a chance." Elena nods, her throat tight, and in that moment she feels a weight lift, not fully, but enough to breathe. This is the power of Christ's teachings lived out in the grit of daily life. Forgiveness does not erase pain, but it transforms it, turning a wound into a window through which grace can enter. Pope Francis reminds us in Fratelli Tutti that every act of forgiveness is a step toward a more just and fraternal world. Elena's story is not unique. It plays out in countless hearts, in workplaces where grudges fester, in families torn by betrayal, in nations struggling to heal. The modern world, with its stress and disconnection, cries out for this radical love, for the courage to forgive amid war, whether that war is fought with bombs or words. Elena's village begins to change. The church reopens, its bells ringing for the first time in years. Neighbors who once avoided each other now share bread, their stories weaving a new tapestry of hope. The children play in the streets, their laughter a defiance of the past. Elena still carries Marco's photograph, but it no longer feels like a tether to grief. It is a reminder of his dream, a world where love outshines hate. For those listening to Elena's story, the invitation is clear to embrace forgiveness as a daily practice, a choice to see the humanity in those who have hurt us. Start with prayer, asking for the strength to let go of anger. Listen not to condone, but to understand. Act using your hands and heart to build bridges where walls once stood. These steps are not easy, but they are possible, and they carry the promise of transformation. In a world that often feels like a battlefield, Christ and Pope Francis call us to be peacemakers, to forgive amid war. Elena's journey shows us that this call is not a distant ideal, but a lived reality, one small choice at a time. As the sun sets over her village, casting golden light on the rebuilt church, Elena feels a peace she thought was lost forever. It is not the absence of pain, but the presence of hope, a hope that whispers even in the darkest moments love can prevail. The bells of the rebuilt church in Elena's village still echo in the crisp morning air, their chimes weaving through the valley like a thread of hope. But hope, as Elena knows, is fragile, easily frayed by the weight of memory and the press of daily life. The village is healing, yet the scars of war linger, not just in the pockmarked walls or the wary glances of neighbors, but in the quieter battles fought within. For Elena, the act of forgiving Dario has opened a door, but beyond it lies a new challenge: how to carry this fragile peace into a world that seems determined to pull her back into conflict. Across the valley in a nearby town, a different kind of war brews, not one of bombs or bullets, but of words and division. The town of San Gregorio is larger than Elena's village, a bustling hub where market stalls overflow with olives and bread, and the hum of scooters fills the streets. But beneath the surface, tension simmers. A local election has split the community, pitting families against each other over politics, progress, and old grudges revived by campaign slogans. Social media, that modern battlefield, amplifies the discord with posts and comments slicing through relationships like a blade. Elena, who travels to San Gregorio weekly to sell her family's olive oil, feels the weight of this division each time she steps into the market square. One morning, as she arranges her bottles under a striped awning, she overhears a heated argument. Two women, Maria and Sophia, stand nose to nose, their voices sharp as shattered glass. Maria, a baker whose shop is a town staple, accuses Sophia, a schoolteacher, of spreading lies about her brother, a candidate in the election. "You've poisoned this town." Maria snaps her hands clenched. Sophia, her face flushed, retorts, "Your brother's promises will ruin us. You're blind to his greed." The crowd parts around them, some whispering, others recording the clash on their phones. Elena watches, her heart sinking. She knows both women. Maria's bread has warmed her family's table, and Sophia once taught Marco to read. Yet here they are, enemies in a war of their own making. This scene, so different from the violence that scarred Elena's village, is no less destructive. It mirrors the struggles of our time, where stress and disconnection erode the bonds that hold us together. In workplaces, homes, and online spaces, we wage wars of ideology and pride, quick to judge and slow to listen. The teachings of Christ and the wisdom of Pope Francis, which guided Elena through her journey of forgiveness, now call her and us to a new task: to be instruments of peace in a world addicted to conflict. Christ's words in this Gospel of John offer a starting point. "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." John 14:27. This peace is not the absence of conflict, but a presence, a strength that anchors us amid the storm. Pope Francis, in his 2019 World Day of Peace message, builds on this saying, "Peace is a conversion of the heart and soul. It requires us to reject violence in our words and actions, to choose dialogue over division." For Elena, standing in the market square as Maria and Sophia's argument escalates, these teachings feel both a comfort and a challenge. How does one foster peace when anger feels so justified? Elena hesitates, her instinct to stay out of the fray. She is no stranger to pain, but this conflict feels different, less personal, yet no less daunting. She thinks of her brother Marco, who once said, "Peace begins with the courage to step into the mess." She thinks of Father Luca's meetings, where listening and shared work built bridges over chasms of hate. And she thinks of Christ's example, how he dined with sinners, spoke with outcasts, and calmed storms with a word. Emboldened, Elena steps forward, her voice soft but steady. "Maria Sophia, please, can we talk just for a moment?" The women pause, startled. The crowd hushes, curious. Elena's heart races, but she presses on. "I know you're angry. I've been angry too. But this," she gestures to the market, the phones, the divided faces. This isn't who we are. She speaks of her village of the church rebuilt stone by stone of Dario, a man she once hated now working beside her. It's not easy, she says, but we can choose something better than this. Maria's shoulders soften, and Sophia's eyes drop to the ground. It's not a resolution, but it's a crack in the wall, a moment where peace might take root. Elena's small act of courage reflects the practical steps we can take to live out Christ's peace in our daily lives. The first step is presence. In a world that rushes to judgment, simply being present, showing up, listening, refusing to turn away, can shift the tide. Pope Francis, in his 2021 address to the diplomatic corps, said, "To build peace, we must be attentive to the suffering of others, ready to encounter them in their need." Elena's choice to step into the argument to offer her voice rather than her silence is a model for us. Whether it's a family feud, a workplace dispute, or an online argument, presence says, "I see you and I'm here." The second step is humility. Christ washed the feet of his disciples, a radical act of service in a culture obsessed with status. John 13:1-17. Pope Francis echoes this in Gaudete et Exsultate, urging us to embrace the path of humility which leads to peace. Humility does not mean weakness. It means setting aside pride to seek common ground. For Elena, this means admitting her own fears and doubts as she speaks to Maria and Sophia. She shares her struggle to forgive Dario, her fear that peace might crumble. Her vulnerability disarms the women, reminding them of their shared humanity. In our lives, humility might look like apologizing first, even when we feel wronged, or asking questions instead of making assumptions. The third step is dialogue. Christ was a master of conversation, engaging Pharisees, sinners, and skeptics with questions that invited reflection rather than defensiveness. Pope Francis, in Fratelli Tutti, calls dialogue a bridge to truth, a path to reconciliation. Elena invites Maria and Sophia to a quiet corner of the market, away from the crowd's gaze. She asks them to share their fears, not their arguments, but the deeper worries beneath. Maria speaks of her brother's dream to rebuild the town's economy, her fear that he'll be slandered into ruin. Sophia confesses her dread of change, her worry that new policies will leave the poor behind. As they talk, the sharp edges of their anger dull, replaced by a tentative understanding. Elena's efforts spark a ripple. Maria and Sophia agree to meet again, this time with others from the town, to discuss the election not as enemies, but as neighbors. The meetings are messy, full of raised voices and old wounds, but they are a start. Elena, drawing on Father Luca's example, suggests a rule: each person must listen before speaking, and each must name one hope they share for San Gregorio. The rule, simple yet profound, shifts the tone. People begin to hear each other, not just the words, but the fears and dreams behind them. The town does not become a utopia overnight, but the market square grows quieter, the arguments less venomous. Posts on social media shift from vitriol to cautious calls for unity. This is the peace Christ offers, not a shallow truce, but a deep, hard-won harmony that begins in the heart. In our world where stress frays nerves and disconnection isolates, this peace is a lifeline. Consider the modern workplace where deadlines and egos clash, leaving colleagues at odds. Or the family dinner table where political differences turn loved ones into strangers. Or the online forums where anonymity fuels cruelty. In each, the steps Elena takes presence. Humility dialogue offer a way forward. They are not quick fixes, but seeds planted with faith that they will grow. Elena's journey in San Gregorio deepens her own understanding of peace. She realizes it is not a destination, but a practice, a daily choice to lean into love rather than fear. She begins to carry this practice beyond the market square into her own life. At home, she notices her mother Clara withdrawing her grief for Marco, a silent wait. Elena, practicing presence, sits with her, not forcing words, but offering her warmth. She practices humility, admitting her own struggles with loss. And she practices dialogue, asking Clara to share memories of Marco, turning grief into a shared story rather than a solitary burden. Slowly, Clara's smiles return, faint but real. The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis illuminate this path. In the Sermon on the Mount, Christ says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Matthew 5:4. This comfort comes not from erasing pain, but from sharing it, from building community amid sorrow. Pope Francis, in his 2023 homily on peace, said, "To be peacemakers, we must first find peace within ourselves, letting God heal our wounds." Elena's work in San Gregorio and at home becomes a mirror reflecting her own healing. Each act of peace she fosters, whether in the market or her mother's heart, strengthens her own. As weeks turn to months, San Gregorio begins to change. The election passes, and though tensions remain, the town feels less like a powder keg. Maria and Sophia, once bitter rivals, now share coffee after meetings, their laughter a small victory. The market square, once a stage for conflict, becomes a place of connection where neighbors linger to talk, not argue. Elena, now a quiet leader, organizes a festival to celebrate the town's resilience, inviting Dario and others from her village to join. The festival is simple music, food, children's games, but it feels sacred, a testament to what peace can build. For those listening to Elena's story, the message is clear. Peace is not a gift we wait for. It is a task we undertake. In a world where conflict feels inevitable, Christ's peace invites us to be different, to show up, to let go of pride, to talk when we'd rather shout. Start with presence. Sit with someone who is hurting, even if you don't have answers. Practice humility. Admit your own flaws, your own fears, and watch how it softens others. Embrace dialogue. Ask questions. Listen deeply. Seek the story beneath the surface. These steps, small as they seem, are revolutionary. They turn battlegrounds into common ground, one heart at a time. Elena stands in the market square during the festival, watching children chase each other through the crowd, their laughter mingling with the music. She thinks of Marco, of his dream for a world where love triumphs. She thinks of Christ, who calmed the storm with a word, and Pope Francis, who calls us to be artisans of peace. The sun dips low, painting the valley gold, and Elena feels a quiet strength within her. The war in her village, the conflict in San Gregorio, the grief in her home, they have not disappeared, but they no longer define her. Peace does, and it is a peace she will carry forward, step by courageous step, into the days ahead. The festival lights in San Gregorio have faded, but their glow lingers in Elena's heart as she returns to her village, the olive groves shimmering under a late summer moon. The valley feels different now, not because the scars of war have vanished, but because the people have begun to weave a new story, one of forgiveness and tentative peace. Yet, as Elena walks the familiar path to her home, she senses a new weight. The work of peace, she realizes, is not confined to grand moments or public squares. It seeps into the quiet corners of life, into the personal struggles that simmer beneath the surface. For Elena, this struggle is her own heart, where grief, doubt, and the pressure of daily life threaten to unravel the hope she has fought so hard to nurture. Her village, though healing, is not immune to the strains of the modern world. The war's end has brought a fragile calm, but it has also left behind economic hardship. Fields lie fallow, shops struggle, and young people like Elena's cousin Matteo dream of leaving for cities that promise more. Matteo, barely 20, spends his days tinkering with a battered motorcycle, his frustration palpable. "There's nothing here," he tells Elena one evening, his voice sharp with restless energy. "No jobs, no future. Why stay?" His words sting not just because they echo the fears of many, but because they challenge Elena's newfound hope. How does one hold fast to faith when the ground beneath feels so unsteady? This is a question that resonates far beyond the valley. In our world, stress gnaws at us. Deadlines pile up, bills loom, and the constant hum of notifications frays our nerves. Disconnection creeps in, isolating us from loved ones, from ourselves, from God. Elena's struggle, like ours, is to find meaning amid the grind, to anchor herself in something greater than the daily churn. The teachings of Christ and the wisdom of Pope Francis, which guided her through forgiveness and peacemaking, now call her to a deeper challenge to cultivate a spirituality that sustains her through life's ordinary battles. Christ's words in the Gospel of Matthew offer a beacon. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Matthew 11:28-29. This rest is not mere escape, but a peace rooted in trust, a surrender to God's presence amid the storm. Pope Francis, in his 2018 apostolic exhortation, Gaudete et Exsultate, writes, "Holiness is not about withdrawing from the world, but about living fully in it, with a heart open to God's grace." For Elena, this means finding a way to live her faith not just in moments of crisis, but in the rhythm of everyday life where doubt and weariness lurk. Elena's first test comes at home. Her mother Clara has begun to emerge from her grief, but the strain of survival weighs heavily. The olive harvest was meager this year, and debts are mounting. Clara's hands, once steady, tremble as she sorts bottles for the market. One evening, as they sit by a flickering lamp, Clara confesses her fear. "What if we lose everything? Elena, what if Marco died for nothing?" The question cuts deep, stirring Elena's own doubts. She thinks of Matteo's restlessness, the village's struggles, and her own exhaustion. The peace she found in forgiving Dario and fostering dialogue in San Gregorio feels distant, like a dream fading in the harsh light of day. Yet Elena remembers Father Luca's words at a recent Mass. Faith is not a feeling. It is a choice renewed each day. She recalls Christ's parable of the sower, Matthew 13:1-23, where seeds fall on rocky ground among thorns and on fertile soil. Her heart, she realizes, is all three rocky, with doubt, thorny with worry, but also fertile, capable of growth. She turns to prayer, not the polished kind, but a raw plea. God, I'm tired. Show me how to keep going. In the silence, she feels a nudge, not a voice, but a memory of Christ's promise of rest, of Pope Francis's call to find God in the ordinary. This is where Elena's spirituality begins to take root, not in grand gestures, but in small, deliberate practices. The first practice is gratitude. Pope Francis, in his 2020 homily on hope, said, "Gratitude opens our eyes to God's gifts, even in the midst of struggle." Elena starts a simple ritual. Each morning she names 3 things she is thankful for. Today, it's the warmth of the sun, Clara's quiet smile, and the memory of Marco's laugh. The practice feels awkward at first, but it shifts her focus like a lens, bringing the world into clearer view. She notices small joys, the scent of olive leaves, the chatter of children outside, the way Dario now greets her with a nod of respect. The second practice is silence. In a world loud with demands, silence is a refuge. Christ often withdrew to pray alone. Luke 5:16, finding strength in communion with the Father. Pope Francis, in a 2017 audience, said, "Silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of God." Elena begins to carve out moments of quiet rising before dawn, to sit by the window, letting her thoughts settle. At first, her mind races worries about money, Matteo's future, the village's survival. But she persists, breathing slowly, offering her fears to God. In these moments, she feels a stillness, a sense that she is not alone. The third practice is service. Christ's life was one of giving, feeding the hungry, healing the sick, comforting the broken. John 13:15. Pope Francis in Fratelli. Tutti writes, "Service is the concrete expression of love, a way to live our faith in the world." Elena looks for ways to serve her village, starting small. She helps an elderly neighbor, Signora Rosa, tend her garden, listening to stories of the war and the old days. She brings bread to a struggling family, sharing what little she has. Each act, though small, feels like a prayer, grounding her faith in action. These practices, gratitude, silence, service, begin to transform Elena's days. They do not erase her challenges, but they give her a framework to face them. She notices a change in herself. Her shoulders are less tense, her heart less heavy. She begins to share her practices with others, starting with Matteo. One evening, as he tinkers with his motorcycle, she sits beside him, the air thick with his frustration. "I know it's hard," she says, "but try this: name one thing you're grateful for." Matteo scoffs, but after a pause he mutters, "This bike, I guess. It's a mess, but it's mine." It's a small crack in his armor, but Elena sees it as a seed. Matteo's restlessness mirrors a broader struggle in the village. The young feel trapped, the old feel forgotten, and the weight of survival presses on all. Elena, inspired by her work in San Gregorio, decides to act. She approaches Father Luca with an idea, a community project to revive the village's olive groves, not just for profit, but for unity. "We need something to work for together," she tells him, "something to remind us who we are." Father Luca, his eyes bright, agrees, and they begin to plan. The project is ambitious: clearing overgrown fields, repairing irrigation channels, and planting new trees. Elena rallies the village, drawing on the dialogue skills she honed in San Gregorio. She listens to fears, Signora Rosa's worry about her strength, Mateo's doubt about the future, Clara's concern about costs. She responds with humility, admitting her own uncertainties, but sharing her hope. "This isn't just about olives," she says at a village meeting. "It's about us, our home, our story." Her words, rooted in the spirituality she's cultivating, resonate. Even Mateo, skeptical at first, signs up his hands, soon stained with earth. The work is grueling, but it binds the village in a way Elena hadn't imagined. Neighbors who once kept to themselves now share tools and laughter. Mateo, working alongside Dario, begins to soften his cynicism, giving way to pride in the groves. Clara, inspired by Elena's gratitude practice, starts each day naming blessings, her smile growing steadier. The project becomes a living parable echoing Christ's teaching in John 15:5. "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit." The village, like a vine, begins to bear fruit, not just olives, but hope, connection, purpose. Elena's spirituality deepens through this work. She sees God in the sweat of her neighbors, in the earth they till, in the quiet moments of prayer before dawn. Pope Francis's words in Laudato Si come to mind. "The universe unfolds in God who fills it completely." Hence, there is a mystical meaning to be found in a leaf, in a mountain trail, in a dewdrop. The olive groves become her sanctuary, a place where faith and life intertwine. She feels Christ's rest not as an escape, but as a strength that carries her through exhaustion. The modern world, with its relentless pace, cries out for this spirituality. We, like Elena, face daily battles, jobs that drain us, relationships that strain us, a culture that measures worth by productivity. Yet Christ's invitation to rest and Pope Francis's call to holiness offer a way through. Start with gratitude. Name 3 things each day that bring you joy, however small. Seek silence. Carve out 5 minutes to sit with God, letting your worries rest. Embrace service. Do one kind act, not for reward, but for love. These practices, simple as they are, can transform our days, turning chaos into sacred ground. As the first harvest approaches, the village gathers to celebrate. The groves, once neglected, now brim with promise. Mateo, his hands calloused, stands beside Elena, a rare smile on his face. "You were right," he says. "There's something here worth staying for." Clara, her eyes bright, squeezes Elena's hand. The celebration is simple, bread, wine, music, but it feels holy, a testament to what faith and work can build. Dario, now a fixture in the village, raises a glass, his voice steady, to new beginnings. The words echo Christ's promise in Revelation 21:5. "Behold, I am making all things new." Elena stands among her people, the stars above mirroring the lights in their eyes. She thinks of Marco, of his dream for a better world. She thinks of Christ, who carried the cross and rose again, and Pope Francis, who calls us to live our faith in the here and now. The struggles remain debts, doubts the pull of the future, but they no longer define her. Faith does a faith that grows in gratitude, silence, and service, a faith that makes all things new. The olive harvest in Elena's village has painted the valley with abundance, the groves heavy with fruit, and the air thick with the scent of pressed oil. Laughter spills from the fields where neighbors work side by side, their hands stained with the earth's bounty. Mateo, once restless, now moves with purpose, his motorcycle forgotten, in favor of a cart he pushes through the rows. Clara's face, etched with years of grief, softens as she bottles oil, her fingers steady. Even Dario, whose presence once sparked tension, is woven into the village's rhythm, his quiet strength a testament to redemption. Yet, as Elena surveys this scene of renewal, a new challenge looms not from within the village, but from beyond its borders, where the world's clamor threatens to disrupt the fragile harmony they've built. News arrives like a cold wind. A regional corporation eager to capitalize on the valley's fertile land has proposed a deal to buy the groves and turn them into a commercial plantation. The offer is tempting money to pay debts, jobs for the young, a promise of stability in a region battered by war and hardship. But it comes at a cost. The groves, a symbol of the village's rebirth, would be stripped of their soul, managed by outsiders who care little for the land's history or the hands that tend it. The village gathers in the church, its rebuilt walls echoing with debate. Some, like Signora Rosa, see the deal as a lifeline. "We can't eat pride," she says, her voice frail but firm. Others, like Mateo, bristle at the thought of losing control. "This is our home," he argues, "not their factory." Elena listens, her heart torn. The groves are more than land. They are a living prayer, a testament to the spirituality she has cultivated through gratitude, silence, and service. To lose them would be to lose a piece of the faith that has carried her through grief and conflict. Yet she understands the desperation in Rosa's eyes, the fear of a future that feels uncertain. This tension between holding fast to what is sacred and meeting the demands of a changing world mirrors the struggles we face today. In our lives, we grapple with choices that pit values against survival, a job that pays well but drains our spirit, a relationship that demands compromise at the cost of truth, a society that urges us to conform rather than stand firm. The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis, which guided Elena through forgiveness, peacemaking, and daily faith, now call her to a new task, to trust in God's providence while navigating the complexities of the world. Christ's words in the Gospel of Luke offer clarity. "Do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds." Luke 12:22-24. This trust in God's care is not passive. It is an active surrender, a choice to seek first the kingdom while facing life's demands. Pope Francis, in his 2015 encyclical Laudato Si', writes, "We are called to be stewards of creation, to care for the earth and each other, with love resisting the throwaway culture that prioritizes profit over people." For Elena, this means finding a path that honors the grove's sacredness while addressing the village's needs, a path rooted in trust, discernment, and community. The village's debate grows, heated voices overlapping in the church's candlelit glow. Elena, once hesitant to lead, feels a stirring within her, the same courage that led her to forgive Dario and calm the market square in San Gregorio. She stands, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "We're not just fighting for land," she says. "We're fighting for who we are, for the faith that brought us together, for the hope we've built." She speaks of the groves as a gift, not just from the earth, but from God, a reminder of their shared story. We can't let fear decide for us, she adds, but we also can't ignore our needs. There's a way forward if we trust and work together. Her words, rooted in the spirituality she has nurtured, shift the room's energy. The village agrees to explore alternatives, forming a council to negotiate with the corporation and seek other solutions. Elena Matteo and Father Luca lead the effort, drawing on the practices that have sustained them. The first practice is discernment. Christ often withdrew to pray before making decisions. Luke 6:12-13, seeking God's will in solitude. Pope Francis, in a 2018 homily, said, "Discernment is not about choosing the easy path, but about listening to God's voice amid the noise." Elena organizes prayer gatherings before council meetings, inviting the village to sit in silence, asking for wisdom. In these moments, she feels clarity, a sense that God is guiding them even when the path is unclear. The second practice is stewardship. Christ's parable of the talents, Matthew 25:14-30, calls us to use God's gifts wisely, not burying them in fear. Pope Francis, in Laudato Si', urges us to cultivate and care for the earth, protecting it from exploitation. The Council researches sustainable farming consulting experts who visit the valley, their boots muddy as they walk the groves. Matteo, his mechanical mind sparking, suggests solar-powered irrigation to cut costs. Clara, inspired by Elena's gratitude, proposes a cooperative model where the village pools resources to sell oil, directly bypassing corporate control. These ideas, born of stewardship, honor the land's sacredness while addressing practical needs. The third practice is unity. Christ prayed for his disciples to be one. John 17:21, and Pope Francis in Fratelli Tutti writes, "Unity is not uniformity, but a harmony that embraces difference." The council meetings are tense with disagreements over strategy and risk. Elena, drawing on her San Gregorio experience, fosters dialogue, ensuring every voice is heard. She asks Rosa to share her fears, Matteo to explain his ideas, even Dario to offer his perspective as a newcomer. The process is slow, but it builds trust. The village begins to see the groves not as a burden, but as a shared mission, a chance to live their faith in the world. As weeks turn to months, the council's efforts bear fruit. They negotiate with the corporation not to sell, but to partner, leasing a small portion of land for sustainable farming while retaining control of the groves. The deal brings income to pay debts and fund the cooperative, which grows under Clara's steady hand. Matteo's irrigation system hums to life, and the village's oil, branded with a label depicting the rebuilt church, gains traction in regional markets. The work is far from perfect tensions with the corporation flair, and not every villager agrees with the plan, but it is a step, a balance between trust in God and engagement with the world. Elena's role in this process deepens her faith. She sees God's providence in the experts who arrived in Matteo's ingenuity in the village's willingness to try. Her practices, gratitude, silence, service, evolve into discernment, stewardship, unity, anchoring her amid uncertainty. She feels Christ's promise of rest, not as an escape, but as a strength that sustains her through long council meetings and sleepless nights. Pope Francis's words in a 2021 homily resonate. Faith is not a shield against hardship, but a light that guides us through it. The groves, once a source of fear, become a symbol of this light, a reminder that God provides even when the way is hard. This story speaks to our own struggles. We live in a world that demands we choose between ideals and realities, integrity or income, community or convenience, faith or fear. Whether it's a career that clashes with our values, a decision to relocate for opportunity, or a cultural pressure to prioritize self over others, we face the same question Elena does. How do we trust God while navigating life's demands? The answer lies in the practices she embraces. Discern. Take time to pray to listen for God's voice before deciding. Be a steward. Use your gifts, time skills, resources to serve others and the world. Seek unity. Build bridges with those who differ, finding harmony in shared purpose. Elena's village becomes a beacon, not just for its oil, but for its spirit. Word spreads, and visitors arrive, farmers from other valleys, journalists, even a group of students from San Gregorio inspired by the festival. They ask how the village resisted the corporation, how they balanced survival with soul. Elena, now comfortable speaking, shares their story, weaving in Christ's teachings and Pope Francis's wisdom. It's not about being perfect, she says. It's about trusting God and each other one step at a time. The students, their phones pocketed, listen intently, their questions full of hope. Mateo, too, finds his place. The cooperative gives him purpose, and he begins training others in sustainable farming, his restlessness replaced by pride. Clara, her confidence growing, leads the cooperative's marketing, her warmth drawing buyers. Dario, ever quiet, works the fields, his presence a steady reminder of redemption. Signora Rosa, though frail, joins the prayer gatherings, her voice a soft anchor. The village is not without flaws. Disputes arise, and the corporation's demands test patience. But it is alive, its faith, a living thing rooted in the groves and the people who tend them. For those listening to Elena's story, the invitation is clear. Trust in God's providence, even when the world presses in. Start with discernment before a big decision. Spend 5 minutes in prayer asking for guidance. Practice stewardship. Use one skill: cooking, writing, listening to bless someone today. Foster unity. Reach out to someone you disagree with, not to argue, but to understand. These steps, small as they seem, are seeds of faith capable of growing through the cracks of a weary world. As the first anniversary of the cooperative approaches, the village plans a celebration not grand, but heartfelt. They gather in the grove's tables laden with bread oil and wine. Father Luca blesses the harvest, his voice carrying Christ's words. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Matthew 6:33. Elena, standing among her people, feels a deep peace, not the absence of challenge, but the presence of God. She thinks of Marco, of his dream for a world where love prevails. She thinks of Christ, who fed the 5,000, and Pope Francis, who calls us to care for our common home. The stars above glitter, and the groves whisper of providence, a promise that faith lived boldly can transform even the hardest ground. The valley hums with the rhythm of a new season, the olive groves now a vibrant testament to the village's resilience. The cooperative thrives, its bottles of oil gracing tables far beyond the valley, each one a story of faith and unity. Elena walks the fields at dawn, her boots sinking into the earth, her heart full yet restless. The victories of the past year, forgiving Dario, fostering peace in San Gregorio, reviving the groves, resisting the corporation, have woven a tapestry of hope, but they have also revealed a deeper truth. The work of living one's faith is never finished. It is a call that echoes through every season, demanding not just action, but surrender, not just strength, but vulnerability. As the village prepares for its harvest festival, a new challenge emerges, one that will test Elena's spirituality in ways she never imagined, drawing her into the heart of what it means to love as Christ loves. The festival is a celebration of the village's journey, a chance to give thanks for the groves, the cooperative, and the bonds that have grown stronger than the war's scars. Lanterns sway in the evening breeze, children chase each other through the fields, and music drifts from a makeshift stage. Matteo, now a leader in the cooperative, organizes games, his laughter a far cry from his once restless anger. Clara, her confidence blooming, oversees the food, her hands deft as she kneads dough. Dario, ever steady, helps set tables, his quiet presence a bridge between past and present. Even Signora Rosa, frail but spirited, sits under an olive tree sharing stories with the young. Elena, watching it all, feels a swell of gratitude, but beneath it, a question gnaws what comes next. How does one sustain this hope when the world's weight presses in? The answer arrives uninvited. A stranger appears at the festival's edge, her face weathered, her clothes worn. She introduces herself as Livia, a refugee from a distant conflict, her village destroyed by a war that mirrors the one Elena's people survived. Livia's story spills out in fragments, a home reduced to rubble, a husband lost a daughter, Anna clinging to her side, her eyes wide with fear. They have wandered for months, seeking safety, only to find closed doors and cold shoulders. I heard of your village, Livia says, her voice trembling, of your groves, your peace. I thought, maybe there's room for us. Anna, no more than 10, clutches a tattered doll, her silence louder than words. Elena's heart lurches. She sees Marco in Anna's eyes, her own grief in Livia's trembling hands. The village, though thriving, is stretched thin. Resources are tight, and the cooperative's success is still fragile. Whispers ripple through the crowd as others notice Livia and Anna. Some, like Rosa, soften their faces, mirroring Elena's empathy. Others, hardened by years of scarcity, murmur doubts. We've only just rebuilt. How can we take on more? The question hangs heavy, a test of the faith that has carried the village this far. Elena feels the weight of their gazes, the unspoken expectation that she who has led them through so much will know what to do. This moment is a microcosm of our world's struggles. We live in an age of displacement, refugees fleeing war, families escaping poverty, individuals seeking belonging in a society that often turns away. Our hearts yearn to help, but our fears of scarcity, of change, of the unknown build walls. The teachings of Christ and Pope Francis, which guided Elena through forgiveness, peacemaking, stewardship, and trust, now call her to the heart of Christian love, to welcome the stranger, to see Christ in the least among us, even when it costs something dear. Christ's words in the Gospel of Matthew are unflinching. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Matthew 25:35. This is not a suggestion, but a command, a call to recognize God in every human face, especially the suffering. Pope Francis, in his 2018 message for the World Day of Migrants and Refugees, writes, "Every stranger who knocks at our door is an opportunity to encounter Jesus Christ, who identifies with the welcomed and rejected strangers of every age. For Elena, Livia, and Anna are not just refugees. They are a sacred invitation, a chance to live her faith in its fullest, most radical form. Yet the path is not simple. Elena gathers the village in the church, the festival's joy giving way to sober discussion. She shares Livia's story, her voice steady, but her hands trembling. "They need us," she says, "not just our pity, but our home." The responses are mixed. Rosa, her eyes bright with tears, nods, remembering her own losses. Matteo, practical yet compassionate, asks, "Can we afford it?" The cooperative's still young. Another villager, Paolo, speaks bluntly. "We've fought too hard to risk it all. What if more come?" Elena listens, her heart aching, but she recalls Father Luca's words. Faith is a choice renewed each day. She prays silently, asking for courage, for wisdom, for love. The first step is encounter. Christ dined with outcasts, touched lepers, and saw the humanity in those others shunned. Luke 5:27-32. Pope Francis, in Fratelli Tutti, urges us to approach others with an open heart, ready to be changed by the encounter. Elena invites Livia and Anna to stay in her home, a small act that shifts the village's perspective. She sits with them, listening to Livia's stories of a village like theirs, of a life upended by violence. Anna, slowly warming, shares her doll's name, Stella like the stars. The encounter humanizes them, turning refugees into neighbors. Elena shares their story at the next meeting, not as a plea, but as a witness. They're like us, people who've lost, who hope, who love. The second step is sacrifice. Christ's life was a gift culminating in the cross. John 15:13. Pope Francis, in a 2020 homily, said, "Love always costs something. Time, comfort, security, but it is the only path to life." Elena proposes a plan the village will take in Livia and Anna, sharing resources to help them rebuild. It means tightening belts, redirecting cooperative profits, even delaying new irrigation plans. She acknowledges the cost, her humility disarming skeptics. "I'm scared too," she admits, "but I believe this is what we're called to do." Her vulnerability, rooted in the spirituality she's cultivated, inspires others. Rosa offers her spare room. Matteo pledges to train Livia in the groves, and even Paolo grudgingly agrees to donate oil. The third step is integration. Christ built a community of disciples, diverse yet united in purpose. John 17:21. Pope Francis, in his 2021 message for migrants, calls for a culture of encounter that integrates newcomers, enriching both them and us. Elena works to weave Livia and Anna into the village's fabric. Livia, skilled in weaving, begins crafting baskets for the cooperative, her hands finding purpose. Anna joins the school, her shy smiles winning over classmates. The village adapts, learning Livia's recipes, teaching her their songs. It's not seamless cultural differences, spark tension, and resources strain, but the effort transforms the community, making it richer, more vibrant. Elena's leadership in this process deepens her faith. She sees Christ in Livia's resilience and Anna's hope in the village's willingness to stretch. Her practices, gratitude, silence, service, discernment, stewardship, unity, culminate in this act of love, a living out of Matthew 25. She feels Pope Francis's words in Evangelii Gaudium come alive. The joy of the gospel is found in giving ourselves away and becoming bread broken for others. The cost is real: less oil for market longer hours, moments of doubt. But the joy is deeper, a peace that surpasses understanding. The village's decision ripples beyond the valley. News of their welcome spreads, drawing attention from San Gregorio and beyond. A journalist visits her article painting the village as a beacon of hope in a world often hostile to strangers. The students from San Gregorio return inspired to start a refugee aid group in their town. Even the corporation, initially skeptical, donates supplies moved by the village's example. Livia and Anna, once outsiders, become integral, their presence a reminder that love expands rather than divides. This story speaks to our world where borders harden and fear fuels rejection. We encounter strangers daily, not just refugees, but co-workers, neighbors, or family members, estranged by difference. Christ's call to welcome them challenges our comfort, asking us to see God in the unfamiliar face. Start with encounter. Spend time with someone new, listening to their story. Embrace sacrifice. Give something up, time, money, pride, to help another. Foster integration. Invite someone into your community not as a guest, but as family. These steps, though costly, are the essence of Christian love, transforming both giver and receiver. As the harvest festival ends, the village gathers under the stars, their tables overflowing with shared abundance. Livia stands beside Elena, her basket of woven goods, a gift to the cooperative. Anna, clutching Stella, laughs with other children, her fear replaced by belonging. Father Luca offers a blessing, quoting Christ. "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Matthew 25:40. The words settle over the crowd, a sacred charge. Elena, her heart full, reflects on her journey. Forgiving Dario taught her love's power. Peacemaking in San Gregorio showed her its practice. Reviving the groves grounded her in daily faith. Resisting the corporation deepened her trust. Now welcoming Livia and Anna reveals love's ultimate call to give without counting the cost. She thinks of Marco, his dream of a world where no one is left behind. She thinks of Christ, who welcomed all, and Pope Francis, who calls us to be a church that goes out to the margins. The valley glows under the moon, and Elena feels a joy that holds both pain and promise, a joy that whispers, "This is what it means to live." For those listening, the invitation is clear love, as Christ loves even when it's hard. Encounter the stranger, sacrifice for them, integrate them into your life. These acts, small or grand, are the threads of a new world woven with faith, hope, and love. As the festival fades, Elena walks home. Livia and Anna at her side, the groves whispering of a God who makes all things new. The journey continues, but for now, this is enough: a step, a surrender, a love that changes everything.